another edition of The Dope, an online business magazine for travel, committed to the cause of sustainability in the travel industry. This is Shobha Mohan, championing this cause for them. An issue very, very close, an issue and an endeavor very close to my heart in this effort by The Dope to ensure that as an industry, how we can travel better, how we can make a difference and bring about a change in the way we promote travel in the industry through the elements of responsible travel. Today we have with us the incredibly charming Mandeep Singh Soin. We all call him Mandy, and great speaker. One of those people who's really inspired many people to set out on the path of responsible tourism. Mandeep Singh Soin, for all those who know him as a friend, would know a lot of things I probably don't know about him. However, he's the founder, managing director of Ibex Expeditions, an adventure and luxury travel company, which is based out of Delhi. He's also the founder president of Responsible Tourism Society of India, a mantle that he wears with great excitement and also with a lot of responsibility. Mandy is being a great adventurer. He's also a great public speaker. So I've been in the audience when he's spoken about his various adventures around the world. He is the recipient of the Tenzing Norgay National Adventure Award for Lifetime Achievement in his field. He's also received the citation of merit by Explorers Club USA. Welcome to this interview by The Dope. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Shobha. That was wonderful to kickstart this initiative by Dope. So yeah, I'm all ears and let's go for it.
Mandy, let's begin by looking at your initial years in the adventure business, right? And I know adventure continues to be a niche, and in its right format, there are very few people who actually promote adventure tourism in India in its full potential and also in the way it has to be promoted.
I think it's been quite an exciting journey because obviously the industry has grown. When we got into it, and I must say it was quite by accident, I would say, or that typical risk-taking element of adventure which I applied to myself in life, which is basically I was studying to join the civil services, but took a year off, went to Europe, trained in the outdoors and so on, started teaching there in the outdoors. But then I said, maybe my heart lies here, so let's give that a shot. So there was that element of, sort of risk-taking, as it were, and we began. And I think some of us who began in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, came from an ethic of being very respectful to the outdoors. And as we saw the industry, which obviously we try to promote, the potential, the good that it could do, the dreams that we could help, people realize, I think over a period of time, it sort of boomed. And I unfortunately can't say that everybody in the game is, responsible or ethical, like, you have free markets. So I think the challenge is really to see how we can get more and more people to do things right, because ultimately, if we don't, then you're impacting the environment or you're impacting the communities. So that's a pretty, interesting juncture where we are. But having said that, it's a very exciting field still, to do sort of offer adventure or offer tailor-made, luxury or whatever. The point is that if you can help realize certain dreams of people where obviously you're extending yourself in, adventure travel or physically or mentally, and if they can achieve that, I think you feel pretty good about that.
Fantastic. Just on this term adventure travel, so what is the ambit of adventure travel where IBEX Expeditions is concerned, and what are the things that you focus on?
So we originally started as a very very focused expedition organizing and trekking in the Himalaya and jeep safaris and all of that. But I think today the board the offering is a much wider thing, and you can actually apply even soft adventure. So even if it's something as simple as culinary adventures, we would still say there's a combination of active holidays as well as the element of, immersion, doing it in a certain level that IBEX is known for, and so on. The thing is quite wide in terms of the adventure activity, but we don't restrict it to just that. We also inject a little bit of adventure or activity into the cultural sort of, aspirations of people and tour itineraries, so that they get a little more of an active feel, they get more of an immersive feel.
Great. And those activities, would you consider riding as one of them?
Or safaris, jeep safaris, mountain biking, or indeed biking now through, the villages of Rajasthan or Kerala, or, simple activities like rafting, of course, which is hardcore. And then you mix and match a lot. So there's a lot of interesting combinations that you can do. And there are certain destinations like, say, Ladakh or Uttarakhand or any of the Himalayan playgrounds. There's so much that you can tailor make in terms of what the customer, would like to experience.
I had one more question for you on when we're talking about adventure, Mandeep. Is when we talk about adventure, we usually put wildlife also into the adventure segment. Do you think that is? You think that works? I mean, from visually, in terms of the challenges that wildlife tourism faces today, does putting that into adventure work?
It's never really been seen as a typically adventure activity, but it's got sort of gray areas, So
Yeah.
the adventure operators also operate, wildlife holidays, as well as the cultural operators also do wildlife. So I think it's that sort of beautiful gray area, which I would term as more in the sort of ecotourism or the, wildlife and conservation genre, where I think there are elements, obviously, of adventure, because potentially, you could be, charged by an animal, or you could have some exciting moments, looking in the eyes of a tiger. But it is not in the same sense that we talk of adventure, where you're pushing yourself physically or mentally, etc., etc. So it's at the lower end, but it's a more immersive, and there are aspects of wildlife tourism which could become very much adventurous. For example, you could do a walking wildlife safari. Now that is, definitely in the adventure genre, because some parks allow you to do walking safaris, or you could do bird watching in Arunachal and be walking through high altitude, alpine meadows. So yeah, there's a kind of a happy overlap.
It serves good purposes on both sides, both for adventure and wildlife, you think?
I think so. And again, I think, the fact that people are starting to look at it from a more conservation oriented, and generally speaking, the adventure industry has been, as a segment, far more aware of the responsibility than any other segment, because of the interaction with nature, communities, and so on. And so that allows a lot of good practice hopefully to happen, because we've suffered in the past with overcrowding of national parks. You have examples of Corbett National Park, which was first mapped that the people that could go inside the national park on a day was, say, 900. All right. And bed capacity around the parks was 4,000. So, it was bizarre. And that's why the lodges resorted to things like having parties or marriages or all the sort of uneco-friendly activities, which is where we've got to obviously bring the balance.
Mandeep, another question I had for you. I mean, I've always wanted to ask you this. So your best adventure trips?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've done as a company is that although we are still primarily largely what is called as an inbound operator, which means we get people from different parts of the world coming to experience India, but we also realize that there is a great segment of the Indian traveler who wants to do something out of the ordinary and are also adventurous. And therefore, we started to do journeys where we would go and lead a journey so that we would also map a destination and so on. And I have to say there have been some, I'm lucky that we've been to all the 7 continents now, but at least something like, say, the Antarctica, is a fascinating land to get to. I mean, that would easily be one of those, must do things before you die kind of story. So, and I'm so happy that the trips that are done there are done in a fairly responsible manner. The numbers are generally controlled. It's nowhere near the limit as yet, but and also, they have a very strong Antarctica Tour Operators Association, which allows for all the good practices to happen. Yeah.
Fantastic.
The other one that sticks in my mind would be, places like very unknown, like Madagascar, and, just to say that it was obviously part of the African continent, and when it broke away, roughly 80% of the species that you see there are just endemic. You will see them nowhere else in the world. I mean, that is so special, isn't it?
Yes.
So, to go there and see these lemurs or, walk through these upside down trees called the baobabs, it's amazing, And likewise, Chile was fascinating, Peru, I mean, the world is a magnificent place. So, if we get to travel, it's a great privilege. And I think that's what we need to probably communicate to people, that it's we've got to stop thinking of it as a right. I mean, think of it as a right, but done responsibly, I think it's a privilege,
Privilege,
and
yes.
Therefore, you want to interact with the people, you want to soak up the cultures, you want to really do things well, and hopefully allow people to get a sense that with your trip you've made some small difference.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Travel is definitely a privilege. We are all missing out. So when with the adventure, what are with the outdoors adventure, with the outdoor adventure, the hardcore adventure stuff, which kind of ensures that you're outside in the against the elements for a quite a considerable amount of time. What are the what are the 5 top things that you, as a company, that you'll enforce, that where traveling responsibly is concerned?
I mean, one of the things which has always been very important is our sort of overall footprint, in terms of the eco footprint. So for many years, or for as long as I can remember, I believe that we've never allowed any campfire in any of our treks or expeditions. Now, that's a little bit crazy for an adventure company who's doing camping, and the thought in the mind always of the people is that you'll have an evening and you'll light a campfire, and it'll be the sort of idyllic picture postcard story. Now, we actually took a pledge when we signed up to something called the Himalayan Environment Trust, Code of the Outdoors. And in that, it basically asked us not to use any firewood, because when you go to the Himalaya, the firewood that you see is generally meant for the local people who depend on it for their firewood and their, cooking story. When we go there as visitors, if we start foraging that firewood and using it for our evening campfire or just lighting, cooking, etc., then they have to travel further and further away from their homes into the forest. So that was the unethical thing, which we thought was not the right thing to do. And of course, in the last sort of decade or two, we've also got so aware of the carbon aspect. So we've kind of replaced it by, getting solar lanterns and explaining to people that we can actually give you in a base camp a very beautiful, a kind of a large dining tent. You can sit there or you can sit outside, and you can still have solar lanterns. We can have gas lanterns, which are much better, and so on. So once people understood why we were doing it and that they were in turn helping something good, they were more than happy to buy into the story. And these are the kind of things that I think sometimes we've got to tell ourselves that it's not always that old thinking that customer is king. Maybe sometimes you need to say environment is king, and then make your policies accordingly. Yeah?
Accordingly, especially where responsible tourism is concerned, I think. At DOPE, we always believe that the final beneficiary of any travel and tourism activity has to be the destination by keeping its integrity intact. And the second is, of course, the local people, the host community is the primary beneficiary.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to give another example, I mean, the one basic thing is that whatever you pack in, you pack out, as in the garbage and so on. And even the tiniest details, which we've now tried to contain in the Responsible Traveler campaign, which we can talk of a little later. But I've suggested that when you go camping, for example, you've also got to build toilet pits, right? And if you're camping on a beautiful grassy meadow, the worst thing is to go there and see a lot of holes that have been dug up by previous campers. So all you need to do is, there is a method called dinner plating. So you cut the hole in a way and that you lift the whole turf and keep it on the side. And after the usage, the next day, you keep the turf back so the grass regrows there. And then when you come to a valley, it's as pristine as it was earlier. Small actions, but very important, because like you said, for the next traveler, you've got to be as responsible as you wanted the place.
Absolutely. So
there are many such things that we have to try and do.
Great. These are two great initiatives for any adventure traveler, especially in the outdoors. In fact, the campfire bit, I keep arguing with when hotels, especially resorts and retreats that are up in the hills, they talk about a bonfire, and that word bothers me. Just the sheer, the image that it gives you of being this huge, large fire pit or something like that. So even campfire, I understand is a no-no. Yeah, that's a great idea.
It's like the sort of big debates that we have, and how much can you kind of push on the responsible aspect. And you're absolutely right. I get a nervous tick when I see bonfires and so on in so many lodges and stuff, especially where of course you can buy legal wood, you can buy stuff, but we don't have a system in India necessarily where it is certified recycled wood or it's certified from a sustainable forest. Then you would feel less guilty.
Guilty, yeah. But even then, it doesn't account for the carbon footprint for the.
Of course, but all I have to say is, I mean, though people like you and I and many others in our responsible society are great, almost activists, I would say. But I don't think we need to become, completely anal, in the sense that if there are times or situations where you can use firewood or a little bit of, it's like homes. I mean, you use a fireplace and you have to heat yourself. Otherwise, it's going to be, problematic. Yeah. So I would say, the balance is there. But if you're just doing it for a general sort of tourism purposes where it can be culled down, I think somebody needs to take
I think that's a great point, Mandeep, because I see that even the mountains, even if it's not cold, like a campfire is like a given. I mean, just campfire, but it just creates the mood and the ambience. I think things like that can be avoided. Necessity is another thing. Yeah. I mean, really beautiful. And I guess these are your work in this area and your insights into this area is what helped you. Is what actually inspired you to be one of the first, one of the founder presidents of Responsible Tourism Society of India, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was very lucky that we had a lot of, there were 13 of us, I think, who got together under the behest of the Ministry of Tourism. Essentially, we found that, there were just one or two organizations within tourism that used to pay a little focus on our environmental impacts, vis-a-vis tour operators or hoteliers. And it was essentially PATA, the Pacific Asia Travel Association. And then it sort of soon moved on to the government of India taking interest, because we used to keep also pushing them and saying, we must make policy which is friendly. And I think that's how it came about in around 2008, that it was formally, we were asked, and we got a great band of people from, like Jose Dominique from the south, and Rakesh Mathur from here in the north, and I grabbed Toby Sinclair, who was from his wildlife thing. We had a parliamentarian in PD Rai, and some wonderful people who came together, and we were asked to form this society. And in those days, it was called the Ecotourism Society of India, because everybody understood what ecotourism was all about. And that's how we sort of launched a society which was focused primarily on giving us best practices and being an advocate for doing things right. We were not about asking the government for any tax reduction or any of the industry issues, for which there are some great bodies and they do their job pretty well. So that's how I think it started. Yeah.
And that's 2008, right? It started in 2008.
Yeah.
2008. And did ESOI at that point in time, Ecotourism Society of India, did it address the entire the spectrum of travel and hospitality, or was it focused more towards ecotourism, which in today's parlance actually means something around green and protected areas and wildlife?
Yes. Yeah, it's very interesting. We had this wonderful gentleman called, and a friend called Harold Goodwin, and who's well known to many of us in India because he's associated with the Outlook Traveler Awards as well, their Responsible Travel Initiative. And he actually told us that although you can call yourselves the Ecotourism Society, would you like to consider being called the Responsible Tourism Society? And at that time, people didn't understand what responsible tourism was. People understood what ecotourism was. It meant, green, it meant doing the right stuff and so on. But over a period of time, it became too niche. And as the industry grew, and as the need for being responsible in every segment of our society, tourism industry became to sort of, or came to take shape, we realized that ecotourism was being seen as too niche, whereas what we were trying to do is to be advocates for the right practices, whether you're a hotel or an airline or a tour operator or a guide, any stakeholder across the board, including communities, including travelers. So that's when we realized over a period of time, because we ran a lot of workshops, we brought out 4 publications on sensitizing industry and, what are the best things to do. We would share best practices by people who were actually the, actual sort of owners and running tourism establishments. So this is all experience coming together. And that's when we realized that actually the time has come where we must transition to the Responsible Tourism Society. And in the process, we'd also got a, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the Ministry of Tourism. Now, the Ministry of Tourism has never done a MOU with any association or society, but they did it with us because they realized that if we want to deliver sustainability in the industry, then we could be a good vehicle to make that delivery. And that's why we change to incorporate all the segments of tourism, every stakeholder. So today we are in a happy stage where we are trying to do sort of, guidelines for almost every segment. And where there are sort of guidelines already, like hotels, they have rating systems, they have a lead rating, which ensures sustainability. But the big sort of umbrella one is called the Sustainable Tourism Criteria of India. And that is for tour operators, and that is for the hospitality segment. And our next thing, what we need to do, is for the destinations. So I think that's pretty much, a broad sweep on how we've transitioned and where we are today.
Yeah, fantastic. And because I have you here, and there's so many words that are bandied around, right? For instance, sustainable, somebody is calling, is sustainable tourism on one hand, and then there's ecotourism. Ecotourism, you very nicely explained that it kind of became very, very niche to, to national parks and to protected areas and things like that. So what would you, is it right to say that responsible tourism will be the overarching ideal for as we are setting out benchmarks?
Yes, I think that's definitely there to stay, Shobha. In fact, there are people now, given what we are all going through vis-a-vis COVID, there are some fantastic thoughts and sort of an insight and looking inwards. And there's also a term called regenerative travel, which has just been coming up. And it's actually taking this whole agenda and using as many ethics as we can to make ourselves really an industry that we can be proud of, that when we put our foot on this planet, we are actually not crushing anything, but in the wake of our footprint, we are leaving something which will grow better. So whether it means you're helping communities through the NGO world, or you're creating some asset for the communities, or helping conservation. So definitely, even if you are city based, we need to be ensuring that if you're a hotel or a guest house, that your carbon footprint is right, that you're treating your customer properly. You're obviously not only customer, because that's a default for most people, but you're also treating your own people properly.
Correct.
And you've got gender equality, you've got no other biases. So there's a lot of social, economic and all, and I think it's a very exciting time for tourism as a segment or as a sector, which is obviously one of the large ones in the world, but we've done a lot of negatives. And I think it's time to pull back on that and increase the positives, because the power of tourism is so great, which is what I love about our sector, that you can really change lives. You can really bring about so much good. And the whole idea is that if we are conscious that the negatives need to be reduced and the positives need to be increased, then, like you said, whether you're sitting in a city space or you're in a wilderness space, or even if you're on a flight. I mean, if you're sitting in an aeroplane and you can see a lot of food that is being chucked, or they don't have a recycling process, or they don't have a system where they can use some of the food that goes back into people who can't afford, there are 101 good things that you can do, apart from, the technological parts where planes need to improve their fuel efficiency or the carbon output, etc., etc. So there's many levels where we can all be responsible.
Absolutely. And the first step, I think, comes with awareness. You are aware that we are a carbon intensive industry, right? Yeah. Once you're aware, you definitely will only make the right choices. Now that, where Responsible Tourism Society of India is concerned, what are the primary areas that you will be focusing on?
So I think at this point in time, at the RTSOI, as we call it, the Responsible Tourism Society of India, it's been quite exciting because we've had time to do a lot of webinars where we've gone back into the educational advocacy model, etc. But we've now realized that if India is looking at driving a lot of domestic travel, I think it's time that we brought out a very clear guideline for being a responsible traveler. Because if we are already addressing the industry through the STCI campaign, which is making them more responsible, and we are already asking government to be more sensitive in their policy, and indeed a lot of state governments are writing their policies. The Ministry of Tourism itself has come up with the tourism policy, and responsible travel is part and parcel of that. I think the one missing link is to ensure that the traveler himself is responsible. So therefore, we brought out these guidelines, which I'm told that the ministry will soon launch as a nationwide campaign, which allows a certain sensitization to come to the traveler. Because like you said, if they don't have awareness of, that every choice they make makes an impact, negative or positive. So we are giving some very simple 10 or 15 guidelines, and we are also trying to be smart with building an app so that, God forbid, tomorrow, if there is something wrong happening, you can actually get a photograph of a tourist chucking garbage down the hill, and that will be reported real time, because there has to be a little bit of carrot and stick policy, which I firmly believe. So that's one of our big initiatives. We also know that in India today, we have a lot of trouble with, wildlife tourism, as in there are a lot of glitches. In some cases, there's overcapacity. In some cases, there is a lot of waiting time at the gates, which is not very customer friendly. In some cases, there are just, incredible amount of lodges that are there where, maybe they need to do much more responsible actions. So there's a plethora of things that we are going to be recommending. And we are also trying to say that if in one state we have some good practices, why can't we share that and take it around the other parts of the country? It's logical. So right now we have one of our teams led by Varun Mathur, who is actually driving this. So Rakesh has done a very interesting program where, we take one initiative and one person is given the responsibility and he drives it forward, right? So we've also got things like, some of us are working on, say, the ecotourism policy of the government. What is our response? We've also had a response on the environmental impact assessment, which the government has come out with.
The draft for.
Yeah. We are not very happy with that, unfortunately, because that's according to us a retrograde step. So there's a lot of interesting ideas, including launching some amazing people as ambassadors of this society. Yeah, there's lots of work to do. There's community interaction, which Mridula from the Tata Trust, who's our honorary secretary, she's driving that initiative forward, and I can probably go on a little longer if you like, for many dreams that we still have, because like they say, a good 1,000-mile journey begins with a very humble single step. So that single step, I think, really was started in 2008, and we are somewhere near the halfway mark, I would like to think. And it should be very exciting with so many people joining up and, giving it a push.
Yes, I think, Responsible Tourism Society of India is really, really getting there. One of the things I found very interesting is that you are responding to some of the government initiatives or, policies that the government is laying out. Because in my opinion, as like you rightly pointed out, responsible tourism actually begins it distributes the responsible tourism right from the ministry down to the traveler and every stakeholder in between. One question that I also had, recently we were all shown the draft policy for national tourism, the draft national tourism policy, right? We were all. So were you happy with the the amount of focus that responsible tourism and sustainable tourism was given in the draft document?
Yeah, Shobha, I admit that I haven't been page to page on that whole document. It's still lying on my computer to get it, into a really big deep dive. But I have gone through some sections that are relevant to us. My only thing is that, of course, you must have a great policy, which is like your guiding, vision and so on. But for me, the most important thing, and I say it with all my white beard here and with the 41 years I've clocked in the tourism industry, that I would really, really be interested in knowing what is the strategy to make sure that some of that policy is actionable, which means back to that wonderful thing which a lot of us in India struggle at various levels, which is the golden word, implementation.
Absolutely.
So how the hell do we actually implement all those wonderful ideas that we have? And that is one of the reasons why we want to take a lot of small ideas and baby steps and make sure that something on the ground is happening. Therefore, one of the crucial things I believe is the idea of carrying capacity. We've been talking about it, we've been hearing about it for years on end. But I believe, to the best of my knowledge, barring national parks, in the other wilderness areas, in the cities, in the towns, there's never been any attempt, or even around a heritage monument or something, to do a simple carrying capacity study. And the industry always gets nervous because they think that when you say carrying capacity, it's like throttling the throat of tourism by reducing numbers. It's not true. In fact, the statistic is that in most cases, you can quadruple the tourism numbers, but you just spread them out, you do it in a more scientific way, and you are happy that the destination is not being ruined. So that's just one of the ideas which I would like to make sure that it happens. And the other big one is, of course, that we have a very large unorganized sector, which has not been brought into the tourism fold. Now, whether it's the government that keeps trying or the organized associations that keep trying, I think they have to do harder. I think we at the RTSOI have decided that we will also start tackling some of those people, whether it's for health, hygiene, safety, sustainability. Because if India has to become sustainable, then I think we need all the actors to be doing their bit. Otherwise, you can't be in a bubble and say, my operator and my hotel is doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
But you go outside and you see all sorts of nonsense happening, which doesn't give the tourist a good holistic experience of being in a, sustainable or a responsible tourism destination at all.
So that you mentioned about implementation. I have another issue where tourism is concerned. As a community, as a race, we actually are not very good at self-regulation. In some countries, you put a board there and it happens, right? Despite a board, despite code of conducts, it just doesn't happen. So in that scenario, will Responsible Tourism Society of India also look at certification, which ensures that the stakeholders, or will there'll be training programs for them? It is something that you would be getting into?
Yes, that's absolutely brilliant point, Shobha. Without certification on the long term, I think it's going to be not a very solid sort of a foundation to stand on. So at this moment, of course, we've got the sort of mother certification, which is the Sustainable Tourism Criteria of India, which was arrived at on the platform of the Global Sustainable Tourism Criteria. It took us about a year and a half to get all the tourism associations, which the Ministry of Tourism drove. And then we came to certain tweaks that we did, and we arrived at the conclusion that these are fit guidelines to be used in the tour operating segment and the accommodation sector. Yeah. So now, hopefully, and it's not mandatory, it's still voluntary, but I think the government will come out with a set of incentives for people who take that extra step. And of course, the realization that today the customer is getting more and more savvy in terms of what he wants vis-a-vis his footprint. The customer itself is going to be putting the pressure on demanding you to be more sustainable, more responsible. So I think that is a very happy sort of a turn that we are seeing, in the worldwide thing. So again, back to good old carrot and stick. I think we've got to do both.
And we are now, when we are looking at this certification programs, we are talking about the entire industry, or the outbound, domestic, inbound, everybody, right? So Responsible Tourism Society of India covers the entire gamut of destination management companies.
Yes, it's very interesting that you mention outbound. As of now, we don't have anything specific for outbound except for the Responsible Traveler campaign, which we hope that if the person is responsible in making the right choices, whether it's choosing the right hotel, if the hotel is doing more, work on environment or more work on, supporting communities, then the choice should be going to that person, right? So in the reverse way, if the person is going out, we hope that he will also be that much more responsible. But if you're saying in terms of travel companies that are sending people out, are they going to be responsible? It's a fascinating thought. I've actually never thought about that, but maybe that's a little gap that we need to plug. For example, I would say, as a baseline, if there are outbound operators, they need to make a call and say that should we stop promoting destinations that are already suffering with over tourism? Can that be a sign of responsibility by them? So, if you are going to say the good old Cancuns or the Barcelonas or whatever, and you're packaging so many holidays for these people, maybe you can do something responsible and do it elsewhere. Just like we are advocating that to our operators within India, like you spread tourism, don't do over tourism. So that's actually a great thought, and we should talk about it at our RTSOI and develop something there as well.
One of the challenges that we've been facing at the DOPE, and something that we've been propagating, and there've been a couple of articles on that, and if you have the time, you should read, is that in the COVID scenario, I mean, I won't even say post-COVID, because it seems to be a continuum, it seems to be a continuing situation. So people have been talking about ditching sustainability or responsible tourism because this is not the time. I mean, I've had people tell me that Shobha, pehle business to aane do, that kind of a thing. What would you say? I mean, and my take, I must tell you, I mean, I know you call me an activist sometimes, but my take is this is exactly the time when you should stick to our guns and say we are going to do it this way.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And it really worries me when we allow people to buy into that narrative, because it is so short-sighted. And it is, we have a plethora of examples. Just to give you one, when we launched a program many years ago, it was called Walking on the River Chadar in Zanskar in Ladakh. And we were very lucky to pioneer that with the government. And essentially it was, this beautiful journey going through this valley of Zanskar, 7 days on the snow, and it was in winter, it was giving jobs to the local community. It was an absolute win-win. And because it was a staggeringly beautiful experience, it became hugely popular. Now, we did this in 1994. And then very next year, I told the government, I said, whatever we do, this is going to become a very unique product. It has opened the doors of winter tourism, and we must put in some basic checks and balances on how many people can go in and go out and so on. And of course, the government gave me exactly the same argument. They said, Abhi to, we haven't even shuru karod the program and you're already putting brakes and all. I said, no, it's a bigger picture thing, Anyway, they didn't agree. So we had some, debates on that. And unfortunately, they said, no, we have to promote, and they promoted it. And it came to such a point that it became a case example of over tourism about 15 years later. And then 2 years later, the government puts in a check, which is, of course, trying to put a little band-aid over a very deep gaping wound, I would say. So I think if we can just step back a little bit, of course we are all hurting, of course we all want business, but let us do it the right way. Because if we don't put in the right foundations now, we are going to probably in a couple of years get into that same syndrome where we are doing over tourism, where we are messing up our sort of destinations and so on, and we've all got to lose in that. So if we want to win, I think it's we can't be short-sighted. We are all hurting. We empathize with that, but I totally agree with you that if there's anything that we can do to allow people to just take a little longer sort of look at the whole picture, then I think we're all winning. Yeah.
Fantastic. And of course, COVID has a vaccine. Climate change doesn't. Thank you so much for joining in, Mandeep, and it was very, very insightful. For those of you who don't know, I am also a proud GC member of Responsible Tourism Society of India, and totally follow Mandeep Singh on everything that he says and he sets out for us. As the president, Mr. Rakesh Mathur, puts out, please do not look at Responsible Tourism Society of India as something, as what it can do for you. This is one opportunity for you all as tour operators and stakeholders to contribute to tourism. Thank you, Mandeep, and look forward to seeing you here again. For those of
you very much, and thank you for being that activist and being with us on the Governing Council. And God willing, we get many more people in the wake and do a great job for the country and the planet.
Thank you for watching this show. Please leave your comments, share generously on your social media, and this message about responsible tourism and how each one of us should be contributing where tourism and travel and destinations are concerned is something that we all should be involved in. This is Shobha Mohan for The Dope News. Like us, follow us. Let's drive this change towards making sustainability and responsible tourism our collective choice. Thank you.